Well, yesterday I was rushing spring. That was pretty cold. And I'm sorry about my shaking hand when I was showing you the underneath the porch of my house. But so what? Roy Underhill, I thought of his name. He's the guy that did the Woodwright Shop, a wonderful craftsman. That was a wonderful series, really. That's the one that I said if you wanted to see timber framing in Germany at a museum in Franconia, that I recommended, and I still recommend. All right, I'll give up being a carpenter here for a little while, and I'm going back to being an English major, I guess. Classics from the medieval period. We're going to be out of the medieval period in another couple days. Already tomorrow I'm going to be talking about why it ended. But anyway, a few more things. Troubadour and minstrel songs. I put a question mark there. If you put a question mark in parentheses, that's a way to indicate doubt on the part of the writer. I don't know that there are any of them that we still really treasure. Now the idea that there were troubadours and that there were minstrels, that the image, I think, is classic. But the songs themselves, for one thing, I don't know how many we have in English. Maybe some. And I did mention that they were important. Well, maybe I didn't. They were important in that they were like the newspaper of the day. They traveled, and the songs that they sang were about the events in the world, in the places they had been. And that was one of the ways people could find out what was going on in the world. What were they singing? But I'll just briefly mention him. Now, Boccaccio was an Italian, and he wrote a collection of stories called the Decameron. I think maybe to English speakers, they're not so important, but or not so well known. But I want you to know about them. There are 100, deca. I think that's 10 in Greek. Anyway, there are 100 of them because it's framed, just like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. This is a framed set of stories. Scheherazade and the Arabian Nights. There is a very famous framed set of stories. There should be 1,001, but there aren't. Anyway, in Boccaccio's Decameron, there are supposed to be 100, because the frame goes that 10 young people withdrew because of the plague coming through, the Black Death, and they withdrew into the countryside and kind of walled themselves in a villa, and in order to pass the time, they were there for 10 days, and in order to pass the time, each one of them would tell a story each day. I guess they were there for 2 weeks, but anyway, there were 10 days of telling stories. So 10 times 10, that's 100. So you might have a story like the third story of the fourth day, or the eighth story of the seventh day. And there are 100 of them. It's a collection of good stories. And there's no one of them that leaps to my mind, but they're famous enough, and I'm sure they're good stories. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Now, to someone who speaks English or wants to know about English literature, he is huge, this guy, Geoffrey Chaucer. He's given the title of Father of English Literature because he actually wrote in English. He died, I think, in the year 1400, so it's still in the medieval period, basically before the printing press was active. But he wrote in English, when the way to write normally at that time was Latin. That was the language of writing, Latin, or if not Latin, French, but not English. In England, people spoke English, but they didn't write English. But he wrote in English. It was Middle English. It would be very hard for you to understand it. I'll show you in a moment. To understand it, heard. But anyway, he wrote a collection called the Canterbury Tales. He wrote some other things too. And now this is not legendary. We've left the world of legend. These guys are historical. He's buried in Westminster Abbey. or at least there's his tomb, there's a marker for him. I think he's buried there. Anyway, it also is a framed set of stories. And the frame is that a group of people, maybe 20 or so, were going to travel to Canterbury, from London to Canterbury, on a pilgrimage to visit the cathedral there. There's a Gothic cathedral in Canterbury, Canterbury Cathedral. Wonderful. And a guy had been, the Archbishop of Canterbury had been murdered in the cathedral, the subject of history and a whole other thing. But anyway, in spring, sometimes people would like to visit the cathedral as a pilgrimage. Well, this group realized that they were going to be traveling together, walking down the road together. And so the night before they left, they decided they would take turns on the way. As they walked, each one would tell a story. And in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, which is more famous probably than any given story, it explains who the travelers were. It goes right down through them. There was the wife of Bath, there was the nun's priest, there was the squire, there was the scholar, the knight, the miller. Each one is described. And then once you get past the prologue, each one tells his story. These are written in iambic pentameter couplets. There was also a nun, a prioressa, that of her smiling was for simplan koi. Her greatest oath was put by Saint Aloy. 5 strong beats to the line, as I taught you back in December, and one line will rhyme once, and then it'll go to a new sound. So it's A, B, B, C, C. That's what's meant by couplets. Well, examples of them are The Knight's Tale. It was made into a movie. I never bonded with that movie very much. I think when it came out, maybe I didn't actually realize that it was based on Chaucer's story. The Miller's Tale is, I want to say it's everybody's favorite, but I don't know, it's my favorite. The Miller's Tale. The miller was this guy with this huge red beard and a coarse, big, strong guy. And when he told his tale, it was bawdy, B-A-W-D-Y, bawdy. I'm tempted to say it was pornographic. I don't really want to say that, but I wouldn't want to have my students read it in school. Anyway, it's very funny, and maybe in case you ever go find that. Lines that are some of my favorite are when I can't remember her name, when she says, "Tee hee," quoth she, "and clept the window too." And at one point when a guy says, a beard, no woman hath a beard." It's funny, and but as I say, not really suitable for 7th and 8th graders. But most of it's unique that way. Each traveler had a different personality, and therefore each one of the stories was quite different. I guess instead of going to 2 videos today, I'll just quote a couple more spots from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It opens like this: "Here beginneth the Talus of Canterbury," I think. Anyway, "One that April with his shore sote the drocht of March." If you don't understand this, I'm speaking in Middle English, or trying to. I'll say it and then I'll say it in modern English. When that April with his shore sote the drocht of March aspersed to the rote, and bathed every wine in such liquor, of which vertu engendered is the floor, than longen folk to go on pilgrimages. In modern English, when April with its showers sweet, the drought of March has pierced to the root, and bathed every vein with such liquor, of which virtue, from whose virtue engendered is the flower, then folk long to go on pilgrimages. There's later on, there's one that says, there was also a nun, there was also a nun, a prioress, a prioress, that of her smiling was full simple and coy, that of her smiling was full simple and coy. Her greatest oath was but by Saint Aloy. Her greatest oath was but by Saint Aloy. In other words, the most that she ever swore was to say, by Saint Aloy. And she was cleped Madame Eglantine. And she was named Madame Eglantine. The one other thing I like to quote, I might actually write this down. There was a scholar among them. The scholar's tale. I don't remember what his tale was, but as the scholar was described, it said, it goes something like this: sounding in moral virtue was his speech, sounding in moral virtue was his speech. Ungladly would he learn, and gladly teach. This is Middle English, and I don't know if I have it quite right. Sounding in moral virtue, it might be an E, virtue was his speech, ungladly would he learn, ungladly teach. He's a hero of mine, this scholar, because gladly would he learn and gladly teach. Either one. He was a scholar. He was happy if he was learning. He was happy if he was teaching. Well, I don't know if I've done Chaucer justice, but now you know about him, and maybe I'll think of something else to tell you for tomorrow. I guess there's only one video today. See you tomorrow.